So y'all know I love talking about the birth rate and that I am on team let the birth rate plummet to hell. All of these birth rate articles start coming out around the same time once the CDC produces the numbers. So now we have this article from NPR. It is a long one. So what is going on with the Trump administration? They want to pump out more babies, and that goes right along with the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025, and the pro-natalist movement. So I'm going to talk about this article from NPR. It's definitely going to be at least 2 parts. It might even be 3. It's long. So buckle up, buttercups. All right, so the article title, they say they want Americans to have more babies. What's beneath the surface? Humanity is dying, billionaire Elon Musk told Fox News anchor Bret Baier recently when asked what keeps him up at night. The birth rate is very low in almost every country, and so unless that changes, civilization will disappear. Through interviews, social media posts, funding for population research, and his own example as a parent of at least 14 children, Musk has become one of the most visible beacons of anxiety about falling birth rates. While he's sitting on a pile of money and other people are struggling, he has anxiety. Oh no. While discussions about the economic challenges of falling birth rates exist across the political spectrum, the right has increasingly taken up the cause under the banner of pro-natalism to promote higher birth rates. The Trump White House is reportedly soliciting suggestions to boost births from married couples as it continues drastic reductions to social services and public health funding. In recent years, a revitalized pro-natalist movement has brought together parts of the religious right, tech types, and dedicated new right anti-feminists. These camps have some disagreements over government policy, technologies like in vitro fertilization, genetic engineering, and the rehabilitation of eugenics. But most are united in the belief that modern culture has failed to adequately prioritize the value of nuclear families and making lots of babies. Last month in Austin, Texas, many proponents of pronatalism met up at the second natal conference, known informally as NatalCon, where the mood was exuberant. Many there see this moment as a chance to advance their agenda through perceived allies in the Trump administration, including Musk and VP Vance. Here is Simone Collins. She's one of these pronatalists, and this one's titled The Techno-Puritans. It says, outside the Trump administration, Simone Collins has purposely made herself into one of the more visible faces of pronatalism. My whole entire Etsy get up right now, it's intentionally cringe, Collins told NPR between other press interviews at NatalCon. She describes her signature look as techno-puritan. There should obviously be more cybernetics in my outfit, but we are combining chunky hipster glasses and a lot of modern equipment with the bonnet and linen clothing and weird Puritan stuff, said Collins, who had her 1-year-old daughter, listen to this name, Industry Americus Collins. Industry Americus, that is their daughter's name, strapped to her back. Collins and her husband, Malcolm Collins, have courted press coverage by being intentionally cringe. It has worked. Over the last few years, they've been profiled by many news outlets, including The Telegraph, The Washington Post, The Guardian. The couple tells journalists they've curated their family's image based on data. They chose their kids' name, Industry Americus, Titan Invictus, Octavian George, and Torsten Savage, in hopes of launching them towards impressive careers. Simone, rather than Malcolm, ran unsuccessfully for state office in Pennsylvania because they felt a woman would be more electable. Techno-Puritan isn't just a fashion choice for the Collinses. It's a religion they've invented in part to maximize fertility, mental health, and social good. Malcolm once slapped their 2-year-old son in front of a reporter, likening it to the behavior of tigers in the wild. We constantly court controversy in order to get our message out because we know that's what gets clicks, Simone told NPR. The number one goal we have is to make everyone universally aware of demographic collapse as a catastrophic issue, she said. Our big focus is primarily on just signaling that this is a culture that values family and kids and secondarily taking a regulatory foot off the necks of parents. The Collinses are seen by fellow pronatalists as members of the movement's tech camp. The couple uses and advocates for in vitro fertilization and claims the embryos of their 4 children were screened for illnesses, mental health issues, and potential intelligence. At a penthouse cocktail party in Austin the night before NATOCon began, the Collinses invited journalists to mingle with the founders of gene editing and genetic engineering companies. The couple's network also includes right-wing tech elites and Silicon Valley venture capitalists. Simone worked for PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel. We talked about Peter Thiel before. And Malcolm's brother works for Musk's ad hoc Department of Government Efficiency team. So the whole Peter Thiel situation, that also overlaps with J.D. Vance because Peter Thiel bought J.D. Vance. Generally, women should not have careers. Generally, women should not be working, y'all. Another pronatalist camp includes the more religiously motivated and believers in strict gender norms. In the movement, they're referred to as the trads, as in traditional. The first NATOCon in 2023 included a presentation by a far-right businessman, Charles Haywood, on the importance of men-only spaces. Haywood, who founded a shampoo company and aspires to be a self-described warlord, told the audience that workplaces should revert to privileging men with families and being segregated by sex. And generally, women should not have careers. They should be socially stigmatized if they have careers, Haywood said at NATOCon that year. He sponsored this year's conference but didn't speak. He blamed birth rate declines on feminism and democratic changes, overturning what he sees as natural hierarchies of gender and race. So just putting white supremacy out there, just putting sexism and racism in the forefront. So when I say things like this country was founded on racism and sexism, I get pushback. This man is putting it out there. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and its progeny are probably the single most destructive set of laws in American history, and all should be wiped forever from the history of this nation, Haywood said in 2023, drawing applause from the NATOCon crowd. And here are the Collinses, Malcolm, Simone, and their 4 kids with those names that I have already forgotten. But dang, he said he would like to roll back the Civil Rights Act. This is the reason why I am so repelled by MAGA and the GOP. So many, these people are putting it out there really front and center with what they want. But the GOP and MAGA, they kind of dance around it. But everything that they do is literally against who I am as an agnostic Black woman. Like, they would literally strip away my rights simply because they don't believe that I deserve them. Where tech and trad overlap. Simone Collins, an entrepreneurial woman with a master's degree from the University of Cambridge, told NPR she thinks Haywood's stances are so dumb. But in addition to their commitment to spaces like NATOCon, the two share a contempt for contemporary culture. In interviews, the Collinses framed their arguments as concerns about preserving diversity or LGBTQ communities. If tolerant progressives don't reproduce, they've argued, authoritarian solutions will assert themselves. Simone often refers to her upbringing in the San Francisco Bay Area by hippie parents as a symbol of her former left-wing bona fides. In an initial interview with NPR last year, Malcolm referred to himself as a major thinker on the left. On their podcast, however, the Collinses say reversing demographic collapse is not possible without addressing wokeness or progressiveness, which Malcolm refers to as the urban monoculture and its goal of cultural genocide. This monoculture survives only by creating popular culture, or as Malcolm has said, by parasitizing children from nearby demographically healthy cultural groups. A complex global trend. Many demographers frame the issue of birth rate declines differently than the pronatalists do, including Karen Benjamin Guzzo, a University of North Carolina sociologist who runs the Carolina Population Center. The United States, she explained, is actually a couple of decades late to the global declining fertility trend. Birth rates have already dropped in Italy, Japan, India, parts of Brazil, and many other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Like I said, this is very long. This will be part 1. Part 2 is coming. So this is part 2 of this long NPR article titled, "They Say They Want Americans to Have More Babies, What's Beneath the Surface," talking about pronatalism because they want more babies. So let's get back into it. Now we have this graph. This is talking about the global birth rate trends since 1960. Now, if you look over here with the orange line, this is the United States. So in about 1960, women were having close to 4 babies per woman, and then it dropped precipitously a little bit under 2, but that looks like it probably coincides with birth control. It raises up a little bit to be right around 2. It hovers there for a little while, and then it drops. And you can see all of the other countries here if you look at these lines. I am always talking about East Asia and how their countries have been doing things. Back in 1960, East Asia, the Pacific, had close to 6 babies. And look at this drop. It's like a roller coaster. So they're out around 1 child per woman in East Asia. And you can look at these other lines as well. The Middle East and North Africa, about 7 in 1960. People don't really know and understand that most countries globally are dropping. I know that some countries still remain high, like Western and Central Africa is still high, but it's still lower. All of these countries are still trending down, even if they are higher than other countries. So I'm just saying you can still see what the graph is, and as women get more access to birth control and rights, they're having less babies. All right, back to the article. It says, up until the Great Recession, we were sort of humming along, right around 2 kids per woman, said Guzzo. Birth rates then began to fall, partly because the U.S. succeeded in reducing teen and unintended births. Yay, that should be exciting, right? Many national governments facing birth rate declines have launched policies to try to raise fertility with mixed results. None has succeeded in sustainably raising birth rates above replacement rate, without also drastically increasing maternal mortality and the number of orphaned children, as was the case with Romania's total ban on contraception and abortion beginning in the 60s. In and outside of pronatalist circles, Guzzo said, there has been a lingering notion that wealthy women have fewer children than their poor and working class counterparts. But recent research shows that this tendency has actually started to reverse in many countries, including the United States. In the 80s and 90s, college-educated women were less likely to have kids than other groups. That is not really the case anymore. They just have them later, said Guzzo. Guzzo said surveys show roughly 80% of people want kids, but for many people, the right moment doesn't materialize. In her research on Americans, she said she has seen that one of the biggest things people think about when they think about having kids is, how does the future look? Respondents want stable housing, job security, healthcare, education, and a good partner, and worry about larger forces like politics and climate change. These worries lead people to make a series of decisions to delay having children with the hopes of having them in the future. Guzzo said this pattern continues because we aren't giving people the society supports to meet their visions of being a good parent. Women are waiting longer to have children. In the United States, the average mother is 27.3 years old when her first child is born, up from almost 23 years old in 1980. In some countries with acuter population issues such as Italy and Japan, the average age is in their 30s. For me, I had children when I was 33 and 36, so I was also an older mother, so I helped push that average up higher. For her, that support could look more like government funding for healthcare, affordable housing, education and childcare, and addressing student loan debt and climate change. Some pronatalists agree and point to evidence that generous government policies raise birth rates. Still, they haven't always put their full support behind enacting those policies. As a U.S. Senator, Vance suggested more than doubling the child credit to $5,000 a child weeks after he skipped a vote on a bill to expand the benefit. Musk Doge has targeted funding for the Department of Health and Human Services and laid off employees who administer Head Start childcare. So they're sitting up here axing programs that support children and mothers. But many more pronatalists, including NATOCON's organizer Kevin Dolan, see their biggest allies as those in the White House right now. This is kind of a cool picture, y'all. Look at that one. Breeding excellence, y'all. Breeding, because we are broodmares. All right, the topic of demographic decline clearly matters to Elon Musk, JD Vance, and many others in the Trump administration, which means that the great ideas here can get a hearing that would not have been possible last year, said Dolan in his welcome speech at this year's NATOCON. Dolan left his data science job in 2021 after his anonymous Twitter and Substack accounts were exposed. Among other things, he'd used them to promote author Charles Murray, who has advanced discredited arguments that social inequalities exist because of the supposed genetic differences between races rather than historical disadvantages and structural racism. After his identity was revealed, Dolan continued sharing his thoughts about how society should be ordered on his podcast. For example, he described love between men and women as a relationship between superior and inferior. Okay then. Now, here is the superior specimen right here, this person. This is that superior person. Woo! Gotta love those superior genes. We're expected to lie about the existence of these hierarchies all of the time. And if our goal is to rehabilitate hierarchies of nature, then the best place to start is the most fundamental natural hierarchies, which are found in the family, he said. And that brings us back to where we started with selective breeding. Dolan was reviewing what he called a fantastic book by Costin Alamaru, an influential hard-right writer who has written I Believe in Fascism or Something Worse. Figures on the right have noted that Alamaru, who goes by the pseudonym Bronze Age Pervert, is a favorite among junior Trump staffers. Oh my goodness, they are just putting it out there. It's blaring. The idea is essentially that our society has become excessively effeminate, weak, compassionate, said Matthew McManus, a lecturer at the University of Michigan. And what they want to do is breed or elevate an aristocratic class that's going to be masculine, violent, not necessarily motivated by, let's call it empathy. Recently, Elon Musk echoed the sentiment on Joe Rogan's podcast, saying the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. McManus is an expert on the modern hard-right thinkers whose ideas Dolan promotes. In these intellectual circles, McManus said, establishing a masculine culture means rooting out feminism and multicultural democracy. Women are to be subordinated to men. They largely are going to be responsible for managing the household, although with no real particular authority. And of course, they're going to have an awful lot of children, said McManus. On his podcast, Dolan has said modern culture and government policies have created a badly dysfunctional breeding system in which excellence is devalued. Part of the vision for NATOCON, as Dolan describes on his podcast, is for it to be a hub for like-minded people to breed a sustainable aristocratic class to resist those cultural forces. So here is a small group of protesters outside of NATOCON this year. A nonpartisan conference. On the opening night of this year's conference, NATOCON attendees bound for the introductory dinner were greeted by a small group of protesters from the adjoining University of Texas at Austin. Eugenicists, off our campus. Racists, off our campus. White supremacists, off our campus. Neo-Nazis, off our campus. They chanted into a megaphone as conference attendees entered the Bullock Texas State History Museum. It was a perplexing experience for speaker Brian Kaplan, a George Mason University economics professor and best-selling author. To go and start calling a whole crowd of people Nazis seemed rather an odd thing to do, he told NPR. In addition to doubling the number of attendees to 200 since the inaugural conference in 2023, Dolan has succeeded in widening the range of speakers beyond the original lineup of hard-right influencers and promoters of scientific racism. So they've expanded. It's not just scientific racism. We got range, y'all. We got variety. Okay, so this has been a long one. This has been part 2. I'm gonna go ahead and make a part 3 because there's still more to this article. So this is part 3 of NPR's very long article. They say they want Americans to have more babies. What's beneath the surface? So I ended it where I was talking about they have range. It's not just the original hard right influencers and promoters of scientific racism. So that's where I ended it. Okay, let's continue. Kaplan was among the increased number of credentialed professors who accepted invitations to speak this year. Dolan has said that NatalCon is nonpartisan, and he told NPR that his goal is to find a solution to birth rate declines that works for everyone. I think it's a tragedy that liberal people are not raising children with their cultural obsessions and interests in skills and talents, Dolan said in an interview. But he also invited pseudonymous writer Peachy Keenan. She also spoke at the first conference, where she said, "We don't really want to market natalism to progressive feminists. The people maxing out their fertility should be people, ideally, who won't raise their children to be gender-neutral furries who want to join Antifa one day." Keenan is one of multiple NatalCon speakers published by Passage Publishing, commonly referred to as Passage Press, which also sells books arguing Black people are inherently more criminal and less intelligent than white people. Passage Publishing founder Jonathan Kieperman both spoke at and sponsored this year's NatalCon. Dolan also featured speakers such as Jack Posobiec, a hard-right political operative who first gained notoriety after spreading the Pizzagate conspiracy theory during the first Trump term. Posobiec is close to the Trump administration and has used anti-Semitic memes on social media. Speaking at the conference's welcome dinner this year, Posobiec referenced detractors of the pro-natalist movement to the enemies of civilization and called them whatever you want, the woke, the globalists, the nihilists. They don't just want to rewrite our history, they actually want to erase our future. They want to erase us, all of us, everyone in the room. His speech at NatalCon focused on the defense of Western civilization. In the past, Posobiec marched in and promoted demonstrations in Poland that included anti-Semitic, neo-fascist groups chanting support for white Poland. As for comment, Posobiec has previously told NPR to enjoy being defunded. Asked whether his curation of NatalCon speakers contradicts his professed nonpartisan goals, Dolan told NPR that he'd love to include more speakers from across the political spectrum. However, he said he thinks progressive people who are frightened by dangerous ideas just may not be a fit for what we're trying to do right now. I would say this needs to be a very high openness, very exploratory, very intellectually curious environment, said Dolan. It's been my experience that if you are unwilling to include people who have been labeled racist, that is functionally a choice to exclude an incredible percentage of people who are thoughtful and interesting and have something new to say. So you got to include the racists and the fascists and and the sexists. We're interesting. All right, it says race self-deletion. Not all the ideas that NatalCon speakers are interested in are new. Around the early 1900s, another period of historically low birth rates, the eugenicist concept of race self-deletion was amplified by President Theodore Roosevelt. It was the idea that white middle-class women were too busy going to college or getting ahead professionally. They were not having babies, explained Alexandra Stern, a University of California, Los Angeles history and English professor who has written books on American history of eugenics and the contemporary far right. Race self-deletion includes fears that some people, like the poor or the new waves of Italian, Polish, and Jewish immigrants, had too many babies, which led to widespread programs of sterilizing supposedly unfit groups in the United States. These and other American policies, like anti-miscegenation laws, went on to influence some of the racial hygiene programs of the Nazi Party. Today's pronatalists, Stern said, are largely aware of this history and often try to disassociate themselves from it. So by a very superficial gloss, today's pronatalist movement could appear to be, let's say, almost libertarian, almost a libertarian approach to baby making, she said. But if you look at the underlying driving ideologies, a la Charles Murray and others who have written about who should be having babies and who should not be having babies, it often comes down to ideologies of genetic determinism and who is more fit or less fit. Stern says it's just as important to think of the pronatalist ideas within the context of what else is happening today, such as rising maternal mortality after the Supreme Court overturned a constitutional right to abortion, or the nation's top health official claiming inaccurately that autistic people lead unfulfilling lives. Trump has signed multiple executive orders targeting transgender people and funding for schools with trans-inclusive policies. Stearns also pointed to attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts and their ramifications for disabled people, women, and people of color. The logic behind targeting DEI is that diversity and difference has been prized over excellence and human optimization, and we have to get back to judging people by their merit and not try to pull everyone up to the same level, because some people just naturally, biologically, or God-given are not going to be at that level, said Stern. Birth rate declines have also been prominent tropes for white supremacist mass pew-pewers, including the pew-pewer who unalived 51 Muslim people and wounded 40 others at 2 mosques in New Zealand in 2019. In a document titled The Great Replacement, the pew-pewer wrote, "If there is one thing I want you to remember from these writings, it's that the birth rates must change. The Great Replacement is a racist concept promoted by at least one NatoCon speaker, that populations in majority white nations are deliberately being replaced by non-white immigrants. Fears about birth rates of white women are often a key component of the theory in extremist literature. In their eyes, this is a path to what they term white extinction, said Michael Fiola, a political theorist at Lafayette College and the author of Rage of Replacement, Far-Right Politics and Demographic Fear. Fiola said it's also no surprise that proponents of scientific racism are helping fund events like NatoCon. There has been a deliberate investment by tech elites to rehabilitate these ideas. We're seeing a far more publicly sanitized set of big arguments being presented at the forefront, and different sorts of speakers coming to the forefront as public faces of the movement, said Fiola. NPR asked Simone Collins to comment on whether her activism helps give cover for the more extreme elements of pronatalism. Her response was that white nationalism is obviously evil and dumb, but then she also reframed some of their ideas. They're just trying to point out that, oh wait, different genetic groups have different general traits, said Collins, so she's trying to soften it a little bit. She and her husband have also traded multiple podcast appearances with the promoter of racial pseudoscience and promoted his book. Malcolm Collins later apologized for recommending the book, but the couple's episodes with the author remain up. Yes, this was long. It was very detailed. This was a great article from NPR. They did a really good job at explaining how all of these people were overlapping and what they are pushing in the history and their pseudoscience behind it. Hopefully, you know, like literally, we have got to know what they are doing. It is not good to just kind of gloss over these people, because these people have been building a foundation for a while, right in public. They're doing it right in front of our eyes. So take this and know and understand that they're going to keep trying to chip away at our rights. You see that they say women should not be working. Feminists are the problem. So take with that what you will, and you understand that not voting was dumb. Voting and doing a protest vote was dumb, because it's allowing these people to swoop in and continue to chip away at women's rights. And I guess if that's what you wanted, then that is what you got. All right, y'all. Let me know what you think. Join the conversation. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.